Week 2 of the 2023 college football season is wrapped up, and so today I'll be giving you guys my Week 3 college football rankings. Another week of action is in the books. Week 2 was filled with a lot of dominant wins. We also saw a couple of matchups that'll definitely be talked about in December, most notably Alabama and Texas. Texas might be for real this season. That's a team that just went into Tuscaloosa, beat Bama by 10. They're definitely a team to keep an eye on moving forward, and that definitely shifted up the rankings quite a bit, especially at the top. So with that, let's get into 1 through 7. Georgia remains number 1 this week. They beat Ball State 45-3. And Georgia, once again, unless proven wrong, they should be number 1. They're going to be number 1 for a while, I think. They're the most complete team in the nation. Defensively, they are brutal. Offensively, they can be just as good. So, Georgia's number 1 clearly in my mind right now. And Florida State, though, I've got Florida State at 2, Texas at 3. My top 7 is going to be very different from the AP poll. I do think that Florida State and Texas have been 2 of the top 3 teams of the season for sure. I think Michigan, there might be a little bit of controversy there. Some will probably be disagreeing with that, seeing Michigan at 5. But there's nothing that has really impressed me out of Michigan so far this season. I think Michigan's a team that's definitely going to be in the conversation for the playoff in a couple of months. And I think that once they play some big games that we'll see them shine. But as of right now, I've got Michigan at 5. I just have been more impressed with the dominance of USC and how Texas just beat Bama, and how Florida State dominated LSU in week 1 and then just destroyed Southern Miss in week 2. So I think Michigan is definitely as good as a lot of these teams, but I think that USC, Texas, and Florida State have been more impressive so far this season. Florida State, having them at 2, honestly, I considered even putting Texas at 2, considering, going into Tuscaloosa, Nick Saban coach team, taking on Bama. I know Alabama's got a few things that they're working through right now. That's still an incredible win there for Texas, winning it by 10. And Florida State obviously is most noted by their win against LSU. And USC, do not sleep on the Trojans. I think USC is a team to really keep an eye on. Offensively, they are one of the best teams in the country, if not the best. Offensively, Caleb Williams, you look at the depth all around. That's a very talented team. And defensively, that was the issue last season, was the defense. And if I've said this, if they can get their defense figured out, USC is a team to keep an eye on. And so far, so good for USC. We'll see this team take on Colorado here in a couple weeks. Turns out that's going to be a huge game to finish out September. And obviously Notre Dame down the road, Utah down the road, and obviously can't forget about Washington and Oregon. The Pac-12 is stacked this season once again. A lot of really good teams, and I think USC is going to really be able to shine here in the next few weeks, and they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. Washington is just outside of the top 5. I really like Washington. This team offensively is, honestly, at this point, you can make an argument they're just as good as USC offensively. Michael Penix has been sharp so far. This offense, the receiving core, I think Washington's really a team to keep an eye on. I think that they play USC a long time from now, but they are definitely one of the teams that I could see being a big-time contender. Defensively, they've looked pretty good so far. So, destroyed Boise State week 1, just beat Tulsa 43-10. So, Washington, definitely keep an eye on them as well. We see them against Michigan State this week on the road. So, their first road test. And Michigan State's looking pretty good so far. So, that's definitely one of the bigger matchups of week 3. Ohio State is number 7. They are still at 7. Really not too many adjustments in the top 10. Ohio State's a team that I think is still working through things as well. Kind of in a similar situation to Alabama. The Buckeyes beat Youngstown 35-7. Offensively, they're not quite there yet. I think Kyle McCord is an excellent quarterback. He just needs some time to get a little bit of experience being the starter of the Buckeyes. And once that happens and this offense starts to click, keep an eye on the Buckeyes. I think this is, any of these teams in the top 7, Georgia's probably number 1, I think, by a little margin. Then 2 through 7 really close. Even 2 through 10, you could say, really close. There are a lot of really good teams this season. Penn State beat Delaware 63-7. They're really a team to keep an eye on. I think they're kind of on the same level as Ohio State, where I think Michigan is the best team in the Big Ten, but Ohio State and Penn State are really tied. for that second position right now. And we're obviously going to learn a lot more down the road when these teams are playing better opponents. And Penn State's got Illinois this week on the road. Illinois just dropped one to Kansas, so they are 1-1 right now, but Penn State definitely a team to keep an eye on as well. Notre Dame's number 9. This team took care of NC State no problem, 45-24. I jumped them up one position. I do think I could have jumped them above even Penn State and Ohio State right now. Notre Dame's really playing well. I think offensively, Sam Hartman, this is a talented team that really could make some noise down the stretch. Alabama lost to Texas by 10, dropping them down 5 positions. I did have them at 5 last week. I think the AP poll had them at 3. I just was a bit conservative from the start with Alabama, and after that loss, I'm going to drop them down 5. I still think they should be above, say, Oregon and Tennessee right now, but I do think that Alabama is still working through things, but still one of the most talented teams in the country. Nick Saban will get it right eventually, just a few things to work through in the beginning parts of this season. Oregon's number 11. This team got away with the win against Texas Tech. That game was close. I mean, Texas Tech led it there by 9 in the third quarter. It looked like Texas Tech was in a position where they could have controlled the rest of that game, but Oregon stormed back, got a huge touchdown late off of a pick 6, and Oregon is 2-0 on the season. Definitely a scare there for the Ducks, but this is still a team that I really like a lot. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye on them. That's another Pac-12 team in here. I mean, the Pac-12 is incredible this season. I mean, it's even better than last year, and wasn't even sure if that was possible. So, I mean, you look at the Pac-12 right now, Oregon State's not too far down from me at number 14. This team took care of UC Davis 55-7. They're 2-0. I mean, you got to consider UCLA is looking pretty good right now. Can't forget about them. And obviously Utah, Washington, USC, and Colorado suddenly. I mean, the list goes on. So the Pac-12 is, I would honestly argue, the second best conference in college football this season, probably above the Big Ten, even though you're Big 3 of the Big Ten with Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. Maybe better than the Big 3 of the Pac-12. But Tennessee's number 12, LSU's number 13. Tennessee beat Austin Peay 30-13. Kind of a close game for a while there. Tennessee, I'm going to be a little bit conservative on them as well. I think that they are definitely a great team, but I do have a couple of questions about them still, so I'm having them a bit lower than the AP poll has them. LSU's number 13, beat Grambling 72-10 last week. Obviously, after the disappointing loss to Florida State, still got them at 13, but the door is still open for them. I still think that they can be a big contender this season. Moving on to 15 through 21, Kansas State jumps up 2 this week. They beat Troy 42-13. Really like K-State a lot. I think they can give Texas a run for their money. I think K-State and Texas, probably your best teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma, not far behind, but Texas, the way they beat Alabama, they're probably the favorite now. The clear-cut favorite in the Big 12, even though there's still a long ways to go. So can't be predicting anything in the Big 12 right now. Probably one of the most unpredictable conferences in the country. Ole Miss is number 16. They beat Tulane 37-20. Really impressed by the Rebels here. I mean, I know Tulane didn't have Michael Pratt. Originally, I was going to take Tulane being at home, but when Michael Pratt went out, I knew that was going to be kind of an issue. But regardless, Ole Miss still scored 37. Really impressed with what the Rebels did. I really like them there. They're going to jump up 7 this week from 23-16. Keep an eye on the Rebels. They are one of the true dark horses of the SEC this season. Utah's number 17. They beat Baylor 20-13. This was also a game where I thought Utah was going to lose it, but they pulled it out in the end. But definitely a scary one there in Waco. Utah drops down 2, just in favor of K-State and Ole Miss. But it's really close. I think Utah, I mean, Cam Rising needs to come back, and that's and the injuries. Got to avoid the injuries if Utah wants to be a contender. And they're just better teams in the Pac-12 right now, I think, than Utah. Utah can be up there. It's just those injuries. Got to get those figured out, and hopefully once they're healthy, they can definitely be up there as well. North Carolina's number 18. They beat App State 40-34. This was an insane game where North Carolina shanked the last-second field goal, went to overtime. I honestly thought after that that App State was going to win it, but North Carolina managed to barely get away with that one, 40-34 being the final. Beat South Carolina week 1. That was an impressive win. I do have them dropping down, though, also in favor of Ole Miss and K-State. But North Carolina is still a team to keep an eye on. I like Drake May a lot, and they could be my favorite in the ACC. Well, no, you got Florida State up there, but North Carolina probably in that second position, I would say right now, along with probably Clemson. Oklahoma's number 19. They beat SMU 28-11. This was a closer matchup, but Sooners still think this team has improved this season. Still like them a lot, so I've got them at 19. Duke is 20. Keep an eye on Duke. They beat Lafayette 42-7, obviously after the dominant win over Clemson. I actually take that back. Duke is in the number 3 position instead of Clemson. Clemson is just not clicking right now like we thought they would. We'll talk about them more in a sec, but Duke, really like them a lot. I think this is a team that really can make some noise in the ACC, be up there as a big contender. And Colorado at 21. I mean, this is a team that I think a lot of Colorado fans, from what I've heard, thought or knew that this was going to happen, but everyone else had no idea that this was going to happen. Colorado 2-0, dominant win over Nebraska, 36-14. I mean, Colorado is, this is a legit team, it appears right now. I think that defensively, they were definitely impressive against the Huskers. Offensively, that's really where I think this team is going to shine this season. So it's just about the defense for them. I do think, though, that the Pac-12 is stacked as it is. I still like USC and Washington and probably Oregon as well over Colorado right now. I don't know that Colorado is better than those teams, especially Washington and USC. But the Buffaloes can still make some noise for sure, so keep an eye on them. And, looking forward for them, they've got their work cut out for them coming up here in a couple of weeks when they take on USC, and they've got them at home. So, that's going to be a massive chance for Colorado to really put themselves on the college football playoff picture. It's insane just saying that about the Buffs, but this was a team that was 1-11 last year. But college football playoff can be in the conversation right now for Colorado, especially if they can get the work done the next few weeks. But moving on to 22 through 25, Miami's number 22. I like this team a lot. I said this last week, and they just beat Texas A&M 48-33. So I've got them entering at 22 this week. I like the Canes a lot. Keep an eye on them. They're probably better than Clemson right now, I think. And then Kansas at 23. This is a very underrated team. I don't think they'll be ranked this week. The AP poll hasn't come out quite yet, but Kansas should be. I think this team is very much flying under the radar right now. And, they've got Texas down the road, so that's going to be a massive test for this team in a couple of weeks. But Kansas should definitely, this team has got the talent and the experience. They are more experienced than they were last season, and last season was a really good year for the Jayhawks. So I think, Kansas, keep an eye on them. I've got them at 23, and Illinois, beating them, no easy thing. Illinois is a solid football team in the Big Ten, especially their defense, really impressive defense, and Kansas got it done. Washington State's 24. Talk about the Pac-12. Another Pac-12 team is on the radar now. I think I've got 7 Pac-12 teams ranked. UCLA is right on the outside looking in. But Washington State, impressive win over Wisconsin, beat them 31-22. They're 2-0, dominant win also in week 1. So I think the Cougars deserve it right now, being in the top 25 just barely. And then Clemson at 25, they beat Charleston Southern. But Clemson just is not clicking quite yet. They in the first half were struggling against this FCS team. So Clemson, in a couple of weeks we'll know more about them, but as of right now, Clemson is very much a disappointment so far this season. UCLA, 26, they're on the outside looking in. Iowa, Tulane, Mississippi State, and Arkansas follow that. I think Iowa's still a team that could be ranked this week. Nice win over Iowa State last week, but offensively still not very impressed with them, so I think they'll be right outside right now. And dropping out Texas A&M, Wisconsin, and Tulane from last week, and pretty insane. UCLA just on the outside. That makes 8 Pac-12 teams that are notable this season. It was 6 last year. I think it could be 8 this season. So Pac-12, I would go ahead and say it. They're better than the Big Ten this season. You got the SEC probably at the top, and Pac-12 right behind. And ironically, this is the last season of the true Pac-12. So pretty insane season we got here. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on these rankings. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.